Peter Mason from the Australian Institute of Export. Today I'm joined by a couple of presenters who will talk to us about distribution agreements and joint ventures, and how they might impact on exporters when they're looking to go abroad. I'm joined by John Kell, partner with Hunt & Hunt Lawyers, and Philip Ming, associate with Hunt & Hunt as well.
Hello,
Is your pronunciation right?
It is, that's correct.
Okay, distribution agreements. Given that businesses are often encouraged to develop a very strong rapport, understanding with the potential buyers they're looking to interact with, is an agreement really essential as part of that arrangement? John, what are your views?
Well, really, I suppose, when you say is an agreement essential, you're saying is a written agreement essential, because even in the absence of a written agreement, there'll still be an agreement between the parties. It's possible, if people have a very good relationship, that they may choose to conduct their business without the benefit of a written agreement. But there are a great many dangers that are inherent in taking that approach, especially from the perspective of knowing whether both parties are on the same page, whether or not they have the same expectations about what they might achieve from their relationship.
Philip, would you like to add something to that?
It's just we see it all the time where people enter into these agreements without having properly documented the arrangement in advance, and that tends to lead to a conflict or possible disputes down the track.
Okay, excellent. So assuming then we need the written agreement, what are some of the essential things that should be included in a written agreement, do you think?
Well, as in all agreements, it's important that the obligations of both parties are spelt out in sufficient detail. In the case of a distribution agreement, if I'm the Australian exporter, then the distributor is going to want to know what I'm going to be providing, the support and assistance that I may give them to help them distribute the products. There may be certain obligations that we need to look at, for example, in relation to packaging and handling. Who's going to have responsibilities for those areas in the distribution of the goods? From the exporter's point of view, they want to know what the distributor is going to do. They may wish to impose performance indicators on the agreements, because it's going to be important for them to maximise sales in the territory. At the same time, while they may be keen to maximise sales, then there's also a brand image that they may want to protect. And so how the distributor goes about promoting sales is also going to be very important.
And should the agreement have an end date, do you think, Philip?
A fixed term is often very important in terms of being able to give some certainty to both parties. Having said that, there's also a good rule of thumb is that you would also have provisions about termination and what happens when there's a breach of the agreement, and when the agreement could come to an end earlier than that fixed term.
Okay, good. And does agreement need to be overly long? How many pages, roughly, would you guess an agreement should be?
Look, it's always going to depend on the subject matter of your agreement. It's possible to probably keep an agreement that really sticks to the basics, that identifies who's the exporter, that identifies who the distributor is, that identifies the product that's going to be distributed, or the services that are going to be distributed, that identifies the price that is going to be charged for those products or services. But you're really going to have to look at what you're distributing. Are you talking about a single product? Are you talking about multiple products? In some cases, the specifications are going to be very important. It may be that you can come up with a simpler form agreement, which is, say, 5 to 10 pages long, but then you might have a series of schedules or annexures to that agreement, where details like specifications for the products, any special shipping and handling requirements may be included there. But once you get into products, for example, where intellectual property is an important component of what is there, it's going to be very important to ensure that the intellectual property protection provisions in the agreement are sufficiently strong and rigorous to protect the holder of those intellectual property rights.
Good. So assuming I've come across this distributor and he says, look, I've got a standard format of agreement here, just sign the bottom of this. Philip, would you suggest that that person get some legal advice of his own, just to check it out?
Well, speaking as a lawyer, it's hard not to advise someone to go and get their a legal opinion, at least, on the agreement, even if the agreement may not be able to be negotiated. It is very important. As John has mentioned earlier, it's important to clarify expectations and to determine how the agreement will operate in practice, as well as what's in the parties' minds.
Okay, good. And what are some of the common traps that you've seen exporters fall into with distribution agreements?
Some of the common traps include that there's the agreements are in two languages. So, for instance, we work with clients that involve distribution networks in China, and it should be clarified in the agreement which one prevails. In this case, we would say the English one would prevail. John probably also has other examples of common traps which people may face.
Often when people are entering into any agreement, whether it's a distribution agreement or otherwise, they can get quite caught up with the enthusiasm of the moment. They're very keen, and the other side is very keen, and so when it comes to agreeing on some of the sticky bits, they can tend to sort of coast over them on the basis that, oh, if that becomes an issue, we'll deal with it at the time. But whenever anything is left on the basis that is to be agreed in the future, when that particular situation arises, that is a time when people can really become quite unstuck, because, as Philip has already said just a moment ago, you don't have a meeting of expectations, and that is a recipe for disappointment.
And should a dispute arise between the exporter and the distributor, what is the best option, as a method of approach for the exporter to take in that circumstance?
It's important for the exporter to have a dispute resolution mechanism in the agreement that is going to facilitate the resolution of the dispute in a way that they're going to be able to rely on. In many situations, people might be tempted to say, fine, here I am in Sydney, we'll have the agreement governed by New South Wales law, we'll agree to the non-exclusive jurisdiction of the courts in New South Wales, and everything will be fine. The difficulty is that if a dispute arises with a counterparty, they might be in China, they might be in the States, they might be somewhere in Europe, the exporter here may succeed in getting judgment against their overseas distributor, but when it comes time to enforcing that judgment, they may find that they have difficulty in doing that. So in each jurisdiction, it's worthwhile for the exporter to take the time to understand what alternative methods of dispute resolution are available. They may choose to rely on the courts, but it may be easier to find out what arbitral schemes exist within the jurisdiction, and to nominate that as the dispute resolution mechanism in the event that a dispute arises. We would still recommend that Australian law would govern the contract, but the dispute will be then decided in the country, and that should make it easier for the exporter to be able to enforce the award that they obtain.
Excellent. Well, John and Philip, thank you very much. We can see from that little interview that there is quite a lot to be considered just in a reasonably simple distribution agreement. So the message is, I think, to have a chat to your local lawyer first to make sure you avoid those pitfalls and problems further down the track. Thank you.